Give yourself 12 weeks before you make any major life decisions like leaving, because you need closure and healing. And if your spouse is willing to stay and work things out, you could really become a better person. You can really be able to, come away a fully healed person. You're listening to Healing Broken Trust with Brad and Morgan Robinson. This is episode 5. Episode 5 is all about the first steps to healing and the mistakes that people make during the healing process. So it's really important. It's going to be really great to know this information. And before you go any further, make sure you go to healingbrokentrust.com/episode 5. That's episode 5, the number 5. And download the tools that we have there. Will help you through this process and to better understand what we're talking about here. So before we get started, let's give the listeners a little bit of context. Brad, why is it important to know kind of the first steps to healing and the mistakes that people make?
Well, because if you know that, you can avoid it.
Right.
This is also another detailed map of just most common mistakes people make and the best general advice starting out in the healing process. And so a lot of these are things that we've seen people do that really slow down the healing process and that keeps people from being able to heal as rapidly as they could.
So really this is going to help anybody in any stage of the process, not just right after you discovered it.
Yeah, I would say that's very true.
Yeah, so no matter where you are in the process, it's going to help you. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go to healingbrokentrust.com/episode 5. Let's get started.
Morgan, do you want to kick off the first steps to healing for someone who's been betrayed?
Absolutely. If you've just found out that your spouse has cheated on you, this is what you really need to do. First, you want to realize that the roller coaster you're about to ride is quite a ride of emotions and that thousands of people board every day. So unfortunately, you're not alone, but it is. There's an up and down experience of emotions. The second is the choices you make in the moment of discovery will impact what your road to recovery will look like. So you want to choose wisely. It's very important. Also, it's important to remain calm and don't do anything violent. Try not to say or do something you can later regret. But when you do have times where your feelings are mismanaged, don't beat yourself up. Remember that you're very normal. That the roller coaster of emotion is very normal. And many people feel like their emotions are all over the place. When one minute you feel sad, the next you feel rage, and the next you feel numb, you're not going crazy. You're experiencing symptoms of trauma. You will likely discover a host of different feelings all at once and at different times. So again, this is normal. Another thing to remember is you want to avoid sexual details about the affair, if there are any. Discovering this information will be re-traumatizing. So that would include things like sexual positions and things that we've talked about in other recordings. But you also want to avoid reading emails, love letters, or other correspondence for the same reason. It can be re-traumatizing. So also you want to realize that the affair partner does deserve blame for the affair, not just your spouse. Okay, that can be quite challenging sometimes, but they do deserve blame for the affair. It does take two people to tango, but bashing their face in will only get you time in prison. So you don't want to do that. Just avoid violence.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Absolutely. And so give yourself 12 weeks before you make any major life decisions like leaving, because you need closure and healing. And if your spouse is willing to stay and work things out, you could really become a better person. You can really be able to, come away a fully healed person. So try to be brave. You can do it. You can do it, and you owe it to yourself to heal completely from the affair. So those are a few things. Another thing to remember is you want to seek support from a same-sex friend or family member who's been supportive of your marriage all along. This person should be a sounding board who understands there are two sides of every story and is willing to tell you when you're wrong. So they're balanced support. And you want to realize also that the first 90 days are the hardest. At the end of 90 days, about half of individuals who experience this are feeling much, much better. So realize that this emotional roller coaster, it lasts for a time. Typically the first 90 days are the worst. So knowing these things can really help you through the pain. Another thing that's really helpful to remember, as you're starting this healing process, you want to know that connecting with your spiritual roots is really helpful. You want to pray, read holy works, go back to church. Doing this, single thing makes it more likely that you'll experience what is called post-traumatic growth. This is what keeps people from becoming bitter and allows them to experience better relationships, develop into wiser people, develop personal strength and gratitude. So experiencing post-traumatic growth also helps change our priorities to what really matters in life. So pursuing those spiritual roots, praying, meditating, focusing on the good, those are very helpful. And one of the most important things that we talk about a lot is you want to get help. It's important to surround yourself with helpful friends and family members who are pro your marriage. But getting professional help is very important. One of the worst feelings is knowing you're caught in quicksand. And the harder you try to get out of the quicksand, the more you sink into it. Negative cycles, something we've talked about a lot here. Negative cycles and fights or disagreements easily pop up when the affair is discussed. So get professional help. It doesn't have to be that way. Instead, it can be something that brings you both together and brings the intimacy back into your marriage. So get help, get professional help, go to counseling. It will do so much for you. You'll find yourself really benefiting from it. So don't try to do it all on your own. We hear so many people that tell us that they try to do it on their own, and it just doesn't help like they hope. So don't worry. It doesn't mean you're a failure. Everybody needs help sometimes, right, Brad?
Yeah, Morgan, that's good advice that you're talking about. If you're the one who's had the affair, this is what you need to do. Your spouse has just found out about it. Or if you're listening to this and your spouse hasn't found out about it, I would say the best thing to do is really just be honest about it if you haven't disclosed it to your spouse yet. They deserve to know this. It's going to rock their world. They're going to be upset. They're going to be hurt. It's going to hurt them. It's going to start a chain of events and reactions that are going to happen. But they deserve to know this. Right. Something this huge and monumental should not be kept from them. And so you really deserve that. You need to tell them. And in fact, it'll help recovery if you're the one that discloses it. That's much better in helping you guys recover than if they discovered it on their own, or someone else told them, or the affair partner told them, or you're the best person to help them heal. And starting with honesty is going to go a long way towards helping you guys recover. So if you haven't told them, I would recommend telling them, because honesty is the best policy, and it's the best predictor of recovery is when there's honesty. And also they deserve to know. They need to know if they want to still be with you, if that's what's happening. And so you can't steal their choice from them. So Morgan, there's other things that people need to do if they've been betrayed. And if you're listening to this, you really want to perk up and hear this. Mm-hmm. Almost everyone who's had an affair will ask this question: is it possible to recover? And the answer is absolutely yes, it's possible. The way recovery happens is by you, the betrayer, becoming completely clean and honest with your spouse. You have to air out all the dirty laundry at once without hesitation. It's best to get it all out at once and not string it along in little bitty pieces here and there. Just get it all out. Here's the story. You don't have to go into sexual details, graphic information about that, or your love for this person, but they do need to know that it's happened. And you may want to answer, and you really should answer all the questions that they bring up and ask. And they may stop you and say, I don't need to know anymore. But typically that doesn't happen. That does happen from time to time, but typically that doesn't happen. And honesty is actually going to be the way out of this problem. To many, it may seem as though telling the truth would make life worse. Actually, it may seem that way briefly, but once the shock is worn off, your marriage is more likely to recover than if you keep things a secret. So honesty is the way out of this.
Absolutely.
And secrets and dishonesty and deception, that typically is the hardest part of this. And so when there is a lot of that, well, not just a little bit of that, it's going to cause havoc in repairing this. So honesty is the way out of this. And many times people wonder how much is too much. Well, lying and deception is too much. Honesty, people can handle that. And typically the hardest part of this is the deception. Right. It is the secrets. It is the lying. So be honest about it. Even if it's to you, you wouldn't think you would stay. You need to be honest. Showing your spouse that you're willing to do whatever it takes after you had an affair helps them recover much more quickly. And so you have this attitude of, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. That's going to help them heal much more quickly. And your attitude towards helping them heal will go a long way towards putting the affair behind you. And so if you have an attitude of, I'm here to do whatever it takes, I love them, I care about them, that's going to go a long way towards moving your marriage forward and helping them heal and putting this behind you guys. So understand your spouse's negative reactions. Those are attempts to try to protect themselves from further harm. And some of these negative reactions are going to be anger, suspicion, controlling behavior. They're going to have a lot of different things, a lot of questions. That's all because they're terrified. They're afraid it could happen again, and they don't feel like they know who you are anymore. And so just be understanding of those negative reactions. It may be testing your patience because in the beginning it's difficult. There's a lot there that you're going to encounter, that shock and that anger and really probably rage in the beginning.
That roller coaster of emotions we were talking about.
Yeah, that Morgan was talking about. You're going to see that. So try to be understanding. Many fear that they will lose everything if they take this path of complete honesty, but you are more likely to lose everything if you keep things a secret.
Right, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, but those are the facts. And so it's really important, even though it is a counterintuitive process, to be 100% honest. Trust this process because it has worked for thousands of other people who have found themselves enslaved by infidelity, who've been trapped in this negative cycle of recovery and who haven't been able to make their marriage better. There's plenty of people like that because they don't know how to heal. And what we're offering you today is information on how to heal. And a huge key piece of that is the honesty portion. And here's the other thing. Trust this process because it has worked for thousands of other people. You can choose at any moment to be honest and forthright, but the longer you wait, the less likely your spouse will be there to hear the truth.
Right.
And that's really important because people have a tolerance for how much pain they can handle. Psychologically, we can only accept so much pain. When people feel like they're being deceived and they're receiving lies, when they're asking for truth, there's only so much of that they can take before they're done.
Right, and you've called them, the betrayed spouse, being like a lie detector, a human lie detector.
They're hypervigilant.
Right, hypervigilant.
They're very aware of what they've been told and what they haven't been told and the details of the story. And so
they can sense that gap in information.
Mm-hmm. So you want to choose to be honest and forthright. But the longer you wait, the less likely your spouse will be there to heal the truth. Time is of the essence. Don't string your spouse along. That is very cruel. What they have experienced is traumatic. The more distant you are, the more emotionally upset they'll be, and the harder it will be for them to recover. And this is, Morgan, this is where people make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about in a minute common mistakes people make. And I just have kind of a different, just different ideas that I've seen and different things that I've seen. But one of the key mistakes is people are very dishonest in the beginning. Mm-hmm. That makes it so much harder to heal because you need that person to be honest. This is already complicated enough. Don't make it harder.
Right.
And just because it's complicated doesn't mean that you can't work through it.
That it's impossible, because it's not.
Yeah, it's not. But you have to, because time is of the essence. You don't want to string them along. You have to be honest. And what big mistake people make is they're not honest in the beginning. Mm-hmm. They lie about things. They cover it up. And so don't do that. Show that you care about your spouse's feelings, that you are truly remorseful. Let them know that you are devastated because what you have done has hurt them. Now, understanding that you want to show that you're hurting for them. You are not hurting because you got caught or you're sad that the affair is over or that your spouse is angry with you. You're sad because you see that they're in pain. Mm-hmm. And that troubles you because you've caused them so much heartache and grief. And that goes a long way towards healing. And we've talked about that in forgiveness.
Right.
So go back and listen to our forgiveness and letting that person in. Realize that your spouse will likely have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
A little of what I talked about at the beginning. Yeah,
a little bit what Morgan was talking about. And they will be okay one minute and raging the next, wanting to leave you and then wanting to stay together. And I'm talking about this typically in the very early days of this.
Like the first 90 days?
Yeah, the first 90 days. This is the most important time to look outside of yourself and realize that they are hurting and they may say and do things that are just them reacting to the hurt. Maybe they want to hurt you right now because they've been hurt. So your spouse is not crazy. They're not going crazy, and things can get better to the degree that they feel like you are there for them. The truth is the healing process will only go according to how good of a supporter and nurturer you are for your spouse, who you've betrayed. Another equally true key is getting professional help for the negative cycles you two will probably get into.
Or that you've already been, even before the affair.
Yeah, that you've even gotten, even before the affair. And Morgan, that's a good observation. Is typically people heal with the negative cycle they had before the affair.
Right.
And so you need to get professional help. And we're going to talk about that
Right, how to find a good therapist.
how to find a good therapist and what to do. Also, you need to make sure you are safe. Your spouse may become a dangerous person because they're very hurt and angry. Make sure you are not in any physical danger through this process.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be patient. Your spouse will ask questions over and over until they fully understand. You will likely be answering the same questions again and again, sometimes hundreds of times. They need to understand why you did what you did. And it's going to be harder for them. And typically where people get caught in asking the same questions is because they don't understand something, or they feel like their spouse isn't quite being honest.
Right.
And so something doesn't make sense. And that keeps them stuck in this hypervigilant state.
And so I would add to that, you want to be kind of thinking through why you did do what you did. Sometimes betrayers don't always know why they did what they did.
Yeah, so during this time, you want to be thinking about why you had the affair. Knowing why you had an affair can be hard for you to figure out in the beginning, but your spouse will want to know, and they'll need to know. Simply replying, "I don't know," isn't enough. Dig deep, and it will help your spouse begin to move closer towards forgiveness. Also, if you need help, go back and listen to our program on why people have an affair, and go back and listen to on answering that why question. And we've gave you guys a list of questions, so listen to that. Just kindly answer the questions transparently and honestly, and you will make it through this. That's important to understand that. Morgan, this is important for people to understand this. Counseling is the best way to get through this time. Some have compared infidelity to losing a child. I've had people tell me that they'd rather go back to Iraq than get cheated on, or get shot at again than get cheated on. You just have a part of yourself that's ripped away. It takes time to come back and join the living after that's happened.
That's intense. Yeah.
And so remember, you can be forgiven for this. If your spouse has agreed to stay with you, they want to put this behind them. Look at it that way. If they're here working with you and they're choosing to be with you, and trust me, people rarely stay through something this painful just for the kids. They're staying because they care for you. They love you.
Right.
And if they're staying with you after they found out about this, it's because they care for you. And they want to put this behind them. They don't want to carry around the pain or hold resentment over your head. They want to let that bitterness and resentment go. They may not know how.
Right.
They may not be capable yet.
Right.
And so the information we've given you and we're providing, this is a huge step towards that end. Forgiveness is a process that doesn't reach its full maturity until later in the recovery process. But it begins when the injured spouse says, "Okay, I want us to have our life together." So realize you are being forgiven.
Right.
And that this is a process towards working towards that end. Focus on being the healer for your spouse. Focus on being that supporter or nurturer they need. You can do that by being totally transparent and expressing your care for them.
Right.
Seek out ways to emotionally connect with your spouse. The most important ingredients to healing from an affair are the betrayer becoming a source of healing. That's so important.
Right.
100% honesty from the betrayer, and not letting the fights or disagreements get between you two. Staying out of that negative cycle. You can refer to our program on the negative cycle that we've talked about and how to get out of that. Again, get professional help. This is very hard to do on your own. You need to get that help. And
Definitely.
I want to transition over, Morgan, to common mistakes couples make in affair recovery.
Okay.
And I would say, and we're breaking this up into what mistakes betrayers make, and we're also breaking this up into mistakes that the one who's been betrayed makes, the injured spouse makes. But a mistake that both of them make is failing to get professional help or the wrong help.
Right.
And that's damaging right there
Right.
when they do that.
The wrong help is just as damaging as not doing anything at all sometimes.
And so we've gone over some of this, but we're going to quickly go over common mistakes betrayers make in recovery, and then spend a little bit more time in how injured spouses slow the healing process. And the reason we're going to spend less time on betrayers in this is because we talked about the secret to healing, and we talk about that in our Fair Recovery program. We talk about that with betrayers, the secret to healing, and we talk about these things. And so I just want to briefly go through this. They minimize the pain that their spouse is in.
Right, right. Being overly focused on their own hurts, pain and concerns, and needs to become a healer.
Yep. There's a lack of knowledge about the healing process.
Right, lack of knowledge about the trauma associated with affairs.
They are experiencing limerence still, meaning they are still in love with the affair partner. They're still trying to make sense out of this, because when people experience limerence, it really causes them to question their feelings that they've had for their spouse, because people typically do not marry somebody they have limerence with, that kind of passionate love with, and they have that with many times an affair partner.
Right.
And so that causes them to question what they have with their spouse, or if they loved him ever.
And we've talked about limerence in previous recordings about the different types of affairs. But the sixth one is they're still experiencing a very horrible negative cycle of fighting and or disagreeing with their spouse as they try to work through the affair.
Yeah, and that's a key one, the negative cycle. They're still communicating in secret with the affair partner.
They haven't completely dropped that. They're not honest about the affair in general.
Yeah, and Morgan, and those are just a summary of the different ones that are there. And there's obviously other mistakes that people make. But let's get into how injured spouses slow the healing process. This is important because if you look at a lot of the literature, a lot of the things that are out there on how to recover an affair, it's almost like the one who's been betrayed is a saint.
Right.
And they've got a halo on and they can do no wrong.
Right.
And in fact, that is, I'm going to step on some people's toes today, some of the things I'm going to talk about. And I'm doing that because you need to really have a mirror shown at you that's talking about the things that you could be doing wrong that's hurting you.
Right.
And many times, it's some of the things on the internet, it's about bashing the person who had the affair, and it's not holding the one who's been betrayed accountable for their actions. So some of these things may be holding them accountable for that.
Right.
I would say the first is, and this is a key one, especially if people get into a lot of this stuff on the internet, the first I would say is, first mistake, how injured spouses slow the healing process. The first thing is they feel entitled or they feel like the betrayer owes them something. They have this chip on their shoulder. They feel like they're owed something. Along with this is the belief it is only up to the betrayer to fix us or to fix the marriage. So they put it all on their shoulders. And let me say this, Morgan, this is important. For you listening to this, I've talked about the betrayer becoming a source of healing, them being supportive, them being nurturing. Talked about them being the healer in this process. It's not all on their shoulders, though. There needs to be compassion on both sides. That's a key ingredient to healing. But if that goes into really an extreme measure, they're maybe the one leaving you because they don't feel like they've ever made you happy. If it's all placed on them, these unrealistic expectations are placed on them.
On the betrayer.
That they have to be
the only source
of healing. And if you're having a bad day, it's because of something they did. That they're going to feel like they're very helpless. They're going to feel very depressed. They're going to feel very ashamed. Typically, one of the reasons men leave is because they don't feel like they're good enough for their wives. And so the betrayer may start feeling like they're not good enough and can't help you.
Right.
And they're going to want to leave because of that. And so and I'm talking about that can happen years down the road even.
Right.
And so you want to look at that in perspective.
But I do want to clarify, too, that both men and women equally have affairs.
Yeah, they do.
Right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, is the person who's been betrayed, we're not saying that you're responsible for their actions. Okay?
Yeah, we're not saying that.
Because they still had the affair. But
here's the thing, Morgan.
Right.
Having an entitlement attitude. This is my right. These are my rights. This is what you owe me. This is what you're supposed to do. Typically, people don't respond very well to that. They may give you what you feel like you're owed, but where is it coming from?
From a place of shame.
Is it coming from a place of love?
Right.
Is it coming from a place of resentment? Is it coming because they have their tail stuck between their legs? You want somebody who wants you. You want somebody to be with you because they love you.
Not because they feel they owe you.
Yeah. And so the other thing, Morgan, people fail to do is they fail to examine what role they could have played in the marriage to create vulnerabilities for an affair to take place. Now, this isn't true for everybody, but most often it is. Situations where somebody's a sex addict, typically the spouse isn't playing into that, I would say.
Right.
But in other types of affairs, you have to examine what role you could have played in the marriage to create vulnerabilities for the affair to take place. And that's another key mistake people make, is feeling like they didn't have any role in this. And that's very damaging. Another is allowing their anger and rage to become uncontrollable.
Right.
You have to keep that in check. You have to get help for that.
Right.
Because that just leads more into that negative cycle. Asking the wrong questions. And that could be questions about sexual details or love letters or emails, text messages, reading those kinds of things.
They can be re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
It's not healthy for you.
Yeah. And Morgan, and here's another one, is allowing themselves to linger too long in the misery of betrayal. It's easy to let this become your sole identity in your whole life. In the early months, it probably can't be any other way than for the injured spouse to be consumed. But as time goes on, injured spouses, those who've been betrayed, need to make a conscious choice to put this behind them. And again, I realize early on this is easier said than done, and the injured spouse's ability to move on will largely depend on where they perceive they stand with the betrayer. Right. And so, but at some point, you got to make a conscious decision. I'm moving on past this.
And I'm going to heal.
Yeah, I'm going to heal.
I'm not going to let this define me as a person and who I am.
Yeah, but again, there's a balanced approach to this. If they feel loved and cherished, it will be 100 times easier for them to begin to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
It is worth adding that not having a laugh outside of the affair recovery process can be damaging as well.
Right, you need to have a life. Mm-hmm.
So being able to find goals and hobbies can make you feel like you're moving forward with your life. And sometimes people just, like I was mentioning, this is their identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being a part of the Betrayed Wives Club.
Right.
It's this...
Or Husbands Club.
Betrayed Husbands Club, and it just becomes your sole identity. You need to move on. That's not healthy.
Yeah, it's not helping you.
This also goes along with what I mentioned earlier, demanding the truth, not asking for it, failing to realize their role in the negative cycle they get caught into. Go check out our information on the negative cycle. This fits in with that. And Morgan, this is important. Giving ultimatums and not following through on them.
Gotta follow through.
If they won't end the affair and they're still talking to that affair partner, and you're talking about you're going to leave them and you're going to be done, and you're giving them ultimatums and you're not following through on them, they're going to keep doing it.
Right. You're not a doormat. And so you need to take care of yourself physically. Sleep. You need to sleep and have a proper diet. Again, it's very hard in the beginning, but it's so important to your recovery.
And Morgan, I want to say why that's important, getting that sleep and proper diet, because it's harder to control our thoughts and our mood when we lack sleep.
Absolutely.
I'm grumpy when I don't get enough sleep.
Yes, he is.
And so Morgan can attest to that. And so those are some common mistakes. Those are obviously not all the mistakes. It's not an exhaustive list or a comprehensive list. Those are just common ones that I see come up that people make.
That keep them from moving forward.
Yeah. And we've been talking about common mistakes couples make in affair recovery and the first things that you need to do in order to heal. You've been listening to How to Recover from an Affair with Brad and Morgan Robinson. Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to Healing Broken Trust. If you like this episode, you can always get our show notes and more details and links to the resources we discussed at healingbrokentrust.com. Also, as long as you're online, head on over to healingbrokentrust.com/retreat for details on an upcoming one-on-one retreat with me. If you like us, please subscribe and leave a review for us on iTunes. As always, everything discussed on this podcast is either my opinion or Morgan's opinion and is not to be taken as relationship advice because I'm not your therapist, nor have I considered your personal situation as your therapist. This podcast is for your entertainment and education only, and I really do hope you've enjoyed it. See you until next time.